Picture this. You're walking through a park, minding your own business, scrolling your phone, thinking about what to eat for dinner. Then the ground opens up beneath you, swallows you whole, and spits you out 50,000 years in the past. No phone signal, no 7-Eleven, no dinner, just you standing in the middle of a freezing forest and about 30 feet away, staring at you like you just insulted his mother, is an ancient human. Thick brow, barrel chest, hands like bear traps, and absolutely zero concept of, let's talk this out. What happens next? That's what we're figuring out today. Modern human versus ancient human. Not a zombie, not a monster, not some Hollywood caveman with a club and a loincloth doing comic relief. A real, functioning, breathing member of an early human population dropped face to face with you. Someone raised on Wi-Fi and soft bread. Who actually wins this? Before you answer too fast, let's slow down, because this question is way messier than it looks. There's a version of this fight where modern humans get demolished in about 4 seconds. There's also a version where the ancient human doesn't even see it coming, and modern humans absolutely wreck the matchup. It depends entirely on which stat we're talking about, and that's exactly why we need to break this down piece by piece. First, let's get our terms straight, because ancient human is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. Are we talking early Homo sapiens from around 50 to 100,000 years ago? Are we talking Neanderthals, who technically weren't even the same species as us but lived alongside our ancestors for thousands of years? Or are we talking something even older, like Homo erectus, who were wandering around over 1 million years before either of those groups showed up? For this video, we're going to treat ancient human as a rotating cast of characters because, honestly, comparing modern humans to all of them gives us a way better picture of what we actually lost and gained over the last 100,000 years. Let's start with the obvious question everyone's already thinking about. Strength, who's stronger? This one might actually surprise you because the answer isn't the caveman, obviously, even though that's what your gut is screaming right now. Ancient humans, especially Neanderthals, were absolute units. Their bones were thicker, their muscle attachment points were bigger, meaning more surface area for muscle to grip onto, and their bodies were built low and wide like a linebacker who skipped every leg day excuse of his life. Researchers who've studied Neanderthal skeletons estimate their raw grip strength and upper body power could have exceeded modern humans by a significant margin, potentially able to overpower an average modern adult without much of a fight at all. But here's the twist. Early Homo sapiens, the actual ancient version of us, weren't quite as brutally overbuilt as Neanderthals were. They were leaner, more efficient, built more like endurance athletes than power lifters. So if you're going up against a Neanderthal, you are, in almost every physical sense, the smaller, weaker animal in that fight. If you're going up against an early Homo sapiens, the gap shrinks, but it's still not exactly in your favor, because that person grew up doing manual labor from childhood, chopping, hauling, climbing, throwing spears at things that wanted to eat them. Their version of a workout was called not starving to death. Meanwhile, what's the average modern human's daily strength routine? Lifting a laptop, opening a jar of pickles, and occasionally losing that battle. We are, generally speaking, weaker in raw physical terms than our ancestors were, and that's not an insult. That's just biology responding to an environment that no longer demands we wrestle deer for breakfast. So round one, strength, goes to the ancient human. Clearly, decisively, embarrassingly. But strength isn't everything, and this is where things start getting interesting. Let's talk about speed and endurance, because this is where modern humans might actually claw a point back. Sort of. Ancient humans were not slow. In fact, some anthropologists argue that early Homo sapiens were some of the best endurance runners to ever exist because a big part of how they hunted was something called persistence hunting. Basically, you don't outrun the animal, you just chase it for hours until it collapses from exhaustion, because humans are freakishly good at regulating body heat through sweating, way better than most four-legged animals that overheat trying to escape us. So ancient humans absolutely had that going for them. Modern humans, though, we didn't lose that ability, we just stopped using it. Anyone who's trained for a marathon today has access to exactly the same biological hardware ancient humans had. The problem is, most modern humans have never had to run more than the distance from the couch to the fridge during a commercial break. So while our top athletic potential is arguably similar, or even improved thanks to better nutrition and training science, our baseline average human is nowhere close to ancient baseline fitness. Basically, ancient humans were all athletes by necessity. Modern humans are athletes by choice, and most of us chose no. So if this modern human dropped into the ancient world happens to be, say, a random office worker who hasn't broken a sweat since gym class in high school, that person loses the speed and stamina battle too. But if this modern human happens to be a trained runner, a soldier, an athlete, someone who's actually put in the work, this becomes a much closer fight, maybe even a fight modern humans could win. All right, let's move to the category that modern humans desperately want to win and actually might: intelligence. Now, hold on, before you get too smug about this one, let's be honest about what intelligence actually means here, because ancient humans were not stupid. This is one of the biggest misconceptions floating around, largely thanks to cartoons and movies that love portraying cavemen as grunting idiots who can barely form sentences. That is wildly inaccurate. Ancient humans had brains that were, in some cases, actually larger than modern human brains. Neanderthals, in particular, had brain volumes that matched or exceeded ours. They made tools, controlled fire, buried their dead with what looks suspiciously like ritual or emotional meaning, created art, used complex hunting strategies that required serious planning and cooperation, and some evidence even suggests they had a capacity for symbolic thought and possibly language. So no, this isn't a fight between a genius and a rock-banging goblin. This is a fight between two intelligent humans who simply grew up learning completely different skill sets. Here's the actual advantage modern humans have, and it's not raw brain power, it's accumulated knowledge. Somebody today knows things ancient humans couldn't have possibly known, not because we're smarter, but because we've had thousands of years of other humans figuring things out and writing it down for us. You know that a sharp rock to the throat kills faster than a blunt one to the arm. You know how to build a trap, start a fire with modern tools, maybe even build some kind of weapon using materials around you, because you've absorbed centuries of accumulated human knowledge just by existing in a modern information-soaked society. The ancient human doesn't have access to any of that. But what they do have is something you probably don't, and this is huge: real world, life or death applied intelligence. This person has likely already been in mortal combat with predators, rival tribes, or the raw brutality of nature itself. Their intelligence isn't theoretical, it's tested. Yours, unless you're combat trained, is mostly untested Wikipedia knowledge with no practical application. So round 3, intelligence, is closer than you'd think, and honestly might tip toward the ancient human in an actual physical confrontation, because knowing facts about survival means nothing if you freeze up the second things get violent. Now let's talk about something people rarely bring up in these hypothetical matchups: disease and immune systems, because this factor alone could completely decide the outcome before a single punch gets thrown. If a modern human gets dropped into the ancient world, their body is walking straight into an environment absolutely packed with pathogens their immune system has never encountered before. No modern medicine, no vaccines, no antibiotics, nothing. A simple cut could become a death sentence through infection. Ancient humans, meanwhile, had immune systems finely tuned to their specific environment, built through generations of exposure to the exact bacteria, parasites, and diseases surrounding them. On the flip side, modern humans might actually be carrying diseases that could be equally devastating to ancient humans, since neither side has immunity to what the other's world produced. This is basically a smaller, weirder version of what happened when European explorers met indigenous populations centuries later, except now it's happening across a 50,000-year time gap instead of an ocean. So realistically, if this fight isn't a quick physical confrontation and instead turns into a prolonged survival situation, disease alone could end this encounter before intelligence, strength, or speed even become relevant. That's not a fun answer, but it might be the most historically accurate one. All right, let's get to what everyone actually clicked on this video for: the fight, the actual moment these two humans meet face to face. Let's set the scene properly. You've just been dropped into a forest that looks nothing like anything from your world. No trails, no signs, no distant highway sounds, just wind, birds, and an eerie silence that makes your hair stand up. You're disoriented, cold, confused, and before you can even process what's happening, you spot movement in the trees. By the way, if you want to go even deeper into the secret lives of ancient humans, I just launched a full course called The Secret Lives of Ancient Humans. 10 modules, 3+ hours of content covering everything we never talk about on YouTube. What they feared, how they communicated, what hunted them, and much more. Plus an exclusive PDF guide included. Link in the description. See you inside. There he is. An ancient human, watching you from behind a rock, completely still, sizing you up the exact same way a predator sizes up unfamiliar prey. This is not a friendly encounter waiting to happen. In a world where every stranger could be a threat to your survival, competition, food supply, or territory, first contact is almost never a peaceful handshake. It's an evaluation. Threat or no threat, prey or predator, ally or obstacle. You're standing there in jeans and sneakers, completely unarmed, heart pounding, and he's standing there with decades of real survival experience, thick, calloused hands, and a mind that's already running through scenarios of how to deal with you. Here's where the fight either goes one of two very different directions depending entirely on distance and awareness. Scenario 1, close range surprise encounter. If this ancient human gets the jump on you, close range, no time to think, this fight is basically over before it starts. Ancient humans grew up in a world of physical confrontation, whether against predators or other tribes. Their reaction speed to sudden violence is going to be sharper than yours. Their grip strength alone could disable an untrained modern human almost instantly, and their willingness to fully commit to violence without hesitation is something most modern humans simply don't have, because most of us have never actually had to fight for our lives before. Hesitation kills in situations like this, and modern humans hesitate constantly. We're wired by a society that discourages violence at almost every level. So, if this is a surprise, close quarters ambush, brutal as it sounds, the ancient human wins this exchange more often than not. Scenario 2, however, changes everything. Let's say there's distance between you two. Let's say you see him before he reaches you, or he sees you but hesitates because you look bizarre and unfamiliar in your strange modern clothing. This buys you time. And time is the single most valuable resource in this entire hypothetical fight. Why? Because time means options. And options are where modern knowledge starts to actually matter. If you have even 30 seconds of distance, your brain, if it's not completely panicking, starts running through possibilities an ancient human literally cannot predict. You could grab a rock and understand exactly how to use it as a throwing weapon with better accuracy than pure instinct alone might give someone unfamiliar with the concept of ranged combat. Though let's be honest, ancient humans absolutely knew how to throw rocks too. You could look for terrain features, high ground, obstacles, anything that levels the playing field a bit. You could try communicating peacefully, showing empty hands, slow movements, universal signals of non-aggression that might buy you enough hesitation to avoid a fight altogether. Because here's something people forget. Ancient humans weren't mindless killing machines looking for any excuse to fight. Violence has always carried risk, even for the strongest human in history. A wound from a fight could get infected and kill you weeks later, even if you technically won. Ancient humans understood this instinctively, the same way animals in the wild often avoid unnecessary conflict unless they're certain of an easy victory. If you don't look like an easy target, or you don't look like a threat, there's a real chance this encounter doesn't turn violent at all. But let's say diplomacy fails, because honestly, for the sake of this video, we all want to see what happens if it turns physical. Let's break down exactly how this fight would likely play out if things go hands-on. The ancient humans' biggest advantages are raw strength, grappling ability, pain tolerance built from a lifetime with no ibuprofen, and pure aggressive instinct, since violence in his world isn't some rare event, it's an occasional part of daily survival. He knows how to close distance fast, how to use his weight and strength to control another body, and how to strike with the kind of committed force that comes from someone who has actually had to fight before, possibly multiple times. Your biggest advantages are unpredictability and potentially footwear and mobility. This sounds like a joke, but it's actually not. Modern shoes give you significantly better traction and ankle support than whatever primitive footwear or bare feet the ancient human might have. If this fight becomes a foot race or requires quick directional changes, you might have a mobility edge. Combine that with unpredictable modern fighting instincts, maybe you know how to throw a real punch, maybe you've done some boxing or wrestling at some point in your life, and suddenly this isn't as one-sided as it initially looked. Realistically, though, if it's a straight up grappling situation, hand to hand, no tools, no distance, the ancient human wins more often than not simply due to raw physical dominance and combat tested instincts. That's the uncomfortable truth. Most modern humans have literally never had to physically fight for their lives. And that hesitation, that half-second pause where your brain goes, wait, is this actually happening, is often the difference between winning and losing a real physical confrontation. But here's the wild card that could flip this entire fight upside down: weapons. If either side gets access to a weapon, everything changes instantly. And this is actually where modern humans might have a sneaky advantage, because your understanding of leverage, mechanics, and improvised weaponry, even basic stuff you've absorbed just by existing in a modern society, could allow you to create something more effective than what pure instinct alone would produce. A sharpened stick used with proper technique, a rock swung with understanding of momentum and target areas, even basic knowledge like aiming for vulnerable areas rather than just swinging wildly, these things matter. Ancient humans obviously used weapons too, and they were incredibly skilled with them: spears, clubs, thrown rocks. But this is genuinely one of the only categories where modern accumulated knowledge might create a real, tangible edge in an actual physical confrontation. So, if this fight turns into a weapons based encounter rather than pure grappling, the odds start shifting more toward 50-50. Maybe even slightly in favor of the modern human, depending on how much practical knowledge that specific person actually has. Now let's zoom out for a second, because this whole video has been framed as a fight, but that's honestly not the most likely outcome of this scenario at all. Realistically, the most probable outcome of a modern human getting dropped in front of an ancient human isn't a fight to the death. It's something far weirder and way more interesting: curiosity. Ancient humans were intelligent, social, and cooperative creatures. Sudden violent aggression toward every unfamiliar thing they encountered would have been an evolutionary disadvantage, not an advantage, because early humans who survived and thrived were often the ones capable of assessing threats accurately rather than attacking blindly and wasting energy or risking injury unnecessarily. If you show up looking strange, moving strangely, dressed in unfamiliar materials, an ancient human's very first instinct might be confusion and caution rather than immediate aggression. This is actually backed up by something anthropologists point to constantly when studying early human interactions and even interactions between different early human species, like Homo sapiens encountering Neanderthals for the first time. These encounters weren't universally violent. Evidence actually suggests interbreeding happened between these groups, meaning at some point, some of these first contact moments were peaceful enough to lead to, well, let's just say more than just a fight. So there's a very real chance that if you got dropped into this situation, instead of an epic action movie battle, you'd get a tense standoff, a lot of confused staring, maybe some very awkward gesturing, and possibly, if you're lucky and you don't do anything that reads as aggressive, you might actually survive this encounter without a single punch thrown. Of course, that's a much less exciting video conclusion. So let's go back to the fight scenario one more time, because there's one more massive factor we haven't touched on yet, and it might be the single biggest wildcard in this entire hypothetical: fear. Modern humans have essentially forgotten what real, primal, life or death fear feels like. Sure, we get stressed about deadlines, arguments, embarrassing moments, but very few of us have ever stared down a creature or another human being who is genuinely capable of ending our life in the next 30 seconds. Ancient humans lived with that reality constantly: predators, rival groups, environmental dangers. This was baseline daily existence for them. That means their nervous system was, in a very real sense, calibrated for handling extreme fear without completely shutting down. A modern human suddenly thrown into this situation might experience something close to total system shutdown: adrenaline overload, tunnel vision, potentially freezing up entirely at the exact moment quick action is needed most. This isn't a weakness of character, it's just biology responding to an experience your body has never had to process before. Meanwhile, the ancient human, while absolutely still capable of fear, has almost certainly experienced genuine danger before, and knows how to function through it rather than being completely paralyzed by it. This factor alone might be the single deciding element in a real confrontation. Strength doesn't matter if you're frozen. Speed doesn't matter if your legs won't move. Knowledge doesn't matter if your brain has short circuited from pure panic. So let's actually total up the scorecard here because I know you want a final answer. Raw strength, advantage ancient human, significantly. Speed and endurance, advantage ancient human, though closer if the modern human is athletic. Intelligence and knowledge, surprisingly close, slight edge to modern human in theoretical knowledge, edge to ancient human in applied survival intelligence. Disease and environmental survival, advantage ancient human by a wide margin. Weapon improvisation, the one category where modern humans might have a real advantage. Psychological readiness for violence and fear management, advantage ancient human significantly. Adding this all up, if we're being completely honest and not just trying to make modern humans feel good about themselves, the ancient human wins this hypothetical matchup in the vast majority of scenarios, especially anything involving close range, unarmed, sudden confrontation. It's not particularly close either. The gap in physical capability, combat experience, and psychological readiness for violence is simply too large for most modern humans to overcome. The only real paths to a modern human victory involve distance, time to prepare, access to improvised weaponry, or a diplomatic resolution rather than a physical one. If you're an athletic, mentally tough, quick thinking modern human with even a small head start, you have a fighting chance. If you're an average person caught completely off guard, the outcome isn't looking great for you. But maybe the most interesting takeaway from this whole hypothetical isn't even about who wins the fight. It's about what this comparison reveals about how much has actually changed for our species over the last 50,000 years. We haven't gotten stronger, we've gotten more specialized. We haven't gotten smarter in some raw biological sense, we've gotten better at accumulating and passing down knowledge across generations, letting each new person start further ahead than the last without having to personally rediscover fire or figure out which berries will kill you. We've essentially traded personal physical dominance for collective intellectual dominance. And honestly, that trade has worked out pretty well for us as a species overall, even if it means individually most of us would probably lose a fist fight against our ancient ancestors. There's something almost humbling about that thought, honestly. Somewhere back in your family tree, there's a version of a human who could have wrestled a modern gym enthusiast into the dirt without breaking a sweat, survived winters without heating, hunted animals that could kill him in seconds, and did all of this without a single YouTube tutorial to guide him through it. Meanwhile, here we are, unable to start a fire without a lighter, getting winded walking up 2 flights of stairs, and yet somehow, through pure accumulated knowledge and cooperation across thousands of years, we've built airplanes, put people on the moon, and created machines that can talk back to us. Maybe that's the actual answer to this whole hypothetical. It's not really about who wins a fight between one modern human and one ancient human. It's about what happens when you multiply that comparison across thousands of years and billions of people. Individually, we might be weaker than our ancestors in almost every measurable physical sense. Collectively, as a species building on everything that came before us, we've become something ancient humans probably couldn't have imagined even in their wildest, most primal nightmares. So next time you're annoyed that you can't open a stubborn jar lid, just remember somewhere in your ancestry, someone was out here wrestling actual predators for a living, and honestly, maybe give yourself a little grace. You're not weak, you're just optimized for a completely different kind of survival now, one that involves keyboards instead of spears, and honestly, that's probably for the best because I don't know about you, but I'm not particularly excited about the idea of persistence hunting an antelope for 6 hours just to earn dinner. If you made it this far, drop a comment telling me who you think would actually win this fight, because I guarantee half of you disagree with everything I just said, and I genuinely want to hear why. This is exactly the kind of hypothetical that gets more interesting the more people argue about it, so let's argue about it.